Yeah, can you tell I don't talk in front of people very often? It's so nice that this is truly just like a Zoom call.
I really feel like I haven't done this since college.
Yeah. It's only been like a couple months for me, but I'm already out of practice.
Yeah.
Cool. So we are live, so whenever you're ready.
Okay. We can start with introductions. My name is Cayman. I was a production design concentration at DePaul last year and the year beforehand. So I just recently graduated and have done 2 features, mostly shorts, and just kind of learned throughout my experience at DePaul. Maggie?
Yeah, and my name's Maggie O'Brien. I was also a production design student at DePaul. I graduated in 2017, and I've done, I think, 5 features and a bunch of shorts and music videos and stuff like that.
Sweet. So we're mostly going to talk about production design and the art department as related to DePaul specifically, but with a little bit of delving into kind of what it might look like in a smaller indie feature type deal, just because that's something we both have experience with. So first off is kind of first conversations, who you might want to talk to when prepping for a short or a feature. These are kind of the 5 big ones that typically jump out and that I've had the most experience with. So there's obviously the director. They're going to be kind of your go-to person whenever you have questions, when you need to find out exactly what you're aiming for. And your job is to really create their vision. So they are going to be like a very big person that you interact with a lot. Especially with, in the beginning, we kind of delve into lookbooks a bit. So being able to create different lookbooks through your eyes and then also through the director's eyes is going to be something that will be super beneficial when kind of joining your ideas, because if you each create a separate lookbook and have your own vision and ideas, bringing them together, you'll kind of see where they cross over, where your visions really align, and like what's going to work best for creating what you want together as a team, really. And then also kind of in that prep area, you're going to have questions when you read a script, especially if that script was written by the director. They're going to be a really awesome resource for you to be able to kind of clarify what you're reading, what something means. Some scripts will have props listed in them. Some scripts will have absolutely zero art direction. So it truly will just kind of depend on how it was written and what you end up finding out as you go along. The next big one is probably the director of photography. They're going to be your hugest partner in like figuring out visuals. They're going to kind of give you their lighting ideas, and you will have to talk about like how that incorporates into what you're bringing into the set. Framing and overheads are a big one. Maggie, I don't know how much you deal with overheads, but that's something that kind of sporadically shows up.
Yeah, definitely. I like to, when I'm making like my prep binder, I like to have my overheads in there, and then I send that out to the director and the DP too, because, you know, that's just a really great way for them to create their shot list and kind of see like, okay, here's the bed, here's the window, we want to light through the window, and, you know, just to give everyone sort of the same sort of reference to go off of. And in that vein, I also like to share my lookbook with the DP, because a lot of times they'll be making their own lookbook that's like, you know, lighting, shots, whatever, DP stuff. And it's really important to like have that communication open. So like if the DP is trying to go for something like really bright and like wants to use all these neon signs or something, and you're like, oh, well, I was envisioning it really like dark and moody. Like it's important to have that kind of conversation, because like, you know, between the director and the DP and the production designer, you're really like the 3 creative heads, and to get everyone on the same page is super important from the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of meetings that should happen between the 3 of you.
Yeah.
When we were prepping for the DePaul in the feature Love a couple years ago, it was just meetings after meetings, week after week with the director and the director of photography. And they were immensely helpful in helping us kind of prepare for what we'd be getting ourselves into as a first feature. And even with all the planning, there were still so many surprises on set that you can truly never prepare for. So another thing is really just being able to kind of make decisions on the spot and like know that everything that you do plan could change in an instant. So that's always fun. Another big person that I've kind of realized later on that is really important to talk to is going to be your gaffer. They are going to have incredible things to say about the lighting and like what needs to happen in order for them to achieve the DP's look. Practicals are a huge one. This kind of falls into both the DP and the gaffer, kind of just depending on what type of short it is and how many people are on the crew. But practicals are kind of something I wasn't aware of when I first started. And like knowing to bring in a bunch of lamps for them to play with so that light is actually coming from somewhere is a big deal. So talking to them is really nice.
Yeah.
Maggie, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, when I was doing when I was working on St. Francis, the first meeting I had with the DP, he was like, "So I want lamps," and I was like, "Okay, like for what scene? Like, what are you envisioning?" He was like, "No, just lamps for all the time, for everything." And I was like, "Oh yeah, okay." And I bought a bunch of lamps, and we had a couple scenes where he was like using my practicals and like putting them on a stand to light, and I was like, I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but happy to help. Whatever I can do. Yeah, that's like a super important thing. And, you know, it's always better to have the option when I'm like doing a walkthrough of a set with a DP and a gaffer. I'm like, so here's my practicals. There's a lamp here. There's a floor lamp over there. They work. I haven't turned them on. If you want them on, you know, that's an option. And just being able to like have that conversation, be like, what works best for you? And, you know, helping everyone out.
Yeah, for sure. And like with that, they also are going to help you figure out like what light bulbs to use. So even like small details like that are something that are immensely helpful that are so small that you don't totally think about all the time.
Yeah.
Another person is going to be your producer, which depending on the short or how many people are on the crew again, might also be your location manager. That was something we had with Love. Leah ended up being location manager pretty much. So she was kind of doing all of that at once, which was a little crazy, but worked out really well. But locations are going to be a huge thing, especially on lower budget stuff, because that is your slate. That's what you're going to have to work with. You like have to know what you're getting into in order to figure out how to manipulate it and adjust it to the vision you're trying to create. So locations are going to be a huge like up in the air thing for a bit too. So you might have a plan and then the location you have ends up with a totally different color than what you expected. So those are going to be a massive thing when it comes to prepping.
Yeah. The other thing I've like noticed is a lot of times if there isn't a location manager, because the production designer, the art director, whoever, you're the one kind of like moving things around and you're dressing the location, you're moving like the homeowner's like, I don't know, collection of antique silverware or spoons or something. Like a lot of times the homeowner will come to you for questions, and you know, even though that's not technically part of your job, if there isn't a location manager, if the producer isn't around, it's just always important to be like very nice, very helpful, very approachable, because like the last thing you want to do is, for whatever reason, be mean to someone who's opening their house to you, and then, you know, you have a bad relationship with that, or like for some reason you lose the location or something. And again, not part of the production designer's job description officially, but a lot of times on smaller things, you do end up answering a lot of location questions. So just to be ready for that and to be nice.
Yeah, for sure. Interacting with homeowners is a really big kind of thing to navigate, especially if there's someone that is a little wary of having that many people in their home. Usually they sign up for it, but sometimes they don't totally know all that goes into it.
Yeah.
So just being able to kind of ease their concerns and let them know, hey, I'm not going to be damaging anything. This like wallpaper that's over here, it comes down. And making sure that you are doing things that aren't going to actually damage a location. So command hooks are a big thing.
Yeah.
Removable wallpaper, contact paper is really awesome, especially for changing like countertops or appliances. Just kind of making sure that you're there to ease those worries and do that prep beforehand to make sure you have the equipment to ease those worries.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the last big one to kind of touch on, obviously there's a lot of people you're going to be interacting with, but a big one is going to be costume designer and makeup department, if they exist on your shoot. So that's another thing. A lot of times when there is a really, really small shoot, you are going to end up being the costume and makeup person. Your skills in this will probably dictate how much of this you'll end up doing. But that is another big thing to keep in mind, because if it's something that doesn't really get talked about beforehand and you show up on set and the actor doesn't know what to wear, it's not going to end up looking cohesive. So yeah, that's a big thing to think about. And if you do end up having that person, they are going to be another like, big person that you're interacting with a lot. If you have any sort of color coordination that you want to create in your film, they're going to be someone to like really dive into that with. They're usually going to have really great ideas that you wouldn't have thought about, and what they do is only going to complement what you do, and vice versa, for sure. Okay. So I think one of the like big things that goes into the beginning process is just your script breakdown. Diving into a script, figuring out what's mentioned, figuring out how many locations there are, what props are like explicitly laid out, what notes the director has already put in, or what notes the script writer has also put in. Sometimes things are really vague and you can kind of take it and run with it as much as you want. And then sometimes things are really, really specific and you kind of have to navigate like what is important to the person that is creating this. Mary, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I just agree with everything that you say. You know, a lot of times, especially on smaller things, the writer is the director, the writer is the actor, or whatever. And just being able to like have that conversation with the writer is like a super, super great thing to do. 'Cause you can be like, hey, you wrote in this scene that she's eating crackers. What do you envision? Like, you know, it's just another person to kind of to pick their brain about, I guess. Yeah. So just being able to go into depth with the scripts and break down everything, and really, you know, it's just a good way to like get to the bottom of what the writer's envisioning, what the director's envisioning, and just pull the whole look together.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward process. Like you're just kind of taking out what has been given to you. And within that, there are kind of different ways to write down what you need to remember. So these are just kind of two examples on the left of rough breakdowns that I've put together for things, and like different categories are really, really helpful. You can break it down by scene. You can break it down by actor, like who interacts with what. I think breaking it down by scenes is probably the most common way to do it and the most helpful.
Yeah.
Just because it helps you kind of keep everything in order, and usually you don't shoot in order. So if you need to kind of flip around and figure out what crosses over with this scene, and we've seen the kitchen an hour before this, but we shot that scene 6 days ago, is everything the same? And just kind of having all of those props laid out and in front of you and some sort of like physical form is really, really nice.
Yeah. It's also super helpful for me to like have it all written down with the scene number, because a lot of times you'll get the shot list and be like, we're shooting scene 24, and I'll be like, is that the one that the one where she comes into the kitchen the first time, or is she in the bedroom? I like can't do it. Can't remember that. So it's always helpful to just like whip out my spreadsheet and be like, 24, bedroom, got it. Okay, this is what we're doing. This is where we're at. Just a really great way to stay organized and on top of everything.
Absolutely. Organization is super important on set.
Yes.
Especially when you have like 17 different categories of things to worry about. Because you've got props, you've got all the set dress in the background. Is it the same? Are you moving in and out of a location? So yeah, it's a lot to think about. Being organized is really helpful and important. And script breakdowns are a great way to do that.
Yeah.
Another great way to kind of get the ball rolling is lookbooks and just general inspirations. These are the three things that I use the most: shot deck, Google slide presentations, and Pinterest. Maggie, I don't know if you have any different experiences or other applications you like.
Yeah, no, I use all those. I use Film Grab, which is super similar to Shot Deck. It's just like a bunch of film stills. And then something I've started using more is the Art Institute. They have a bunch of, you can just like search by paintings, by photographs, whatever. And that's always a great way, for me at least, to draw inspiration, be like, oh, like I read the script. I really feel like, I love the tones in this color. And I feel like, this painting feels like this script to me. Like that's a lot of how I work, is just like not thinking about it too hard, and just like the instant, like, oh, this feels like this scene to me, and this painting really reminds me of like this character when she's alone, whatever. I could get way into the inspiration rabbit hole, but yeah, I mean, like these things are great resources, and also just like, wherever you draw inspiration from. If it's Instagram, I have like a whole tab of like saved Instagram posts that I just really like. And so when I'm creating a lookbook for a movie, I'll scroll through that. I'll scroll through the Art Institute. And then, I always use Google Slides because it's such an easy thing to, throw all your pictures on, throw in some information, and just like share the link with whoever.
Yep. And those lookbooks are something you're going to kind of talk about with the DP and the director a lot. So that's another great way to have everything kind of organized in one place. And I love what you said about like finding paintings. Like that's not how my brain would work, but I love that idea. And like finding inspiration from everyday life is really, really important too. Like you're going to come across things that you wouldn't find when you're looking for them. And so being able to just kind of save those and hold on to them for future reference is really great. And that's why I like Pinterest, but Instagram is a really awesome place for that too.
Yeah.
And yeah, another thing that you kind of pull inspiration from, or at least I pull inspiration from, is furniture. So like finding really fun furniture, or like seeing really awesome pieces that like create a whole room. Like in this green slide up in the top middle, there's a chair just in the middle of it, and that was a chair that our DP had already and was like willing to let us use in the set, and that kind of inspired like an entire idea for a living room. So you can find it anywhere, and it's really, really cool to pull things from like different locations and bring it all together in your lookbooks. One more small little thing is like theater tech. There are lots and lots of books on how they create theater sets. And I don't know if it's still the same, but when I was at DePaul, we did end up taking a couple of theater classes, and I ended up learning so much about like painting and textures and the way those like kind of things can go together in a frame, which was really, really cool. And textures is a really fun one to create through like different mediums, and theater is a really good example of how to do stuff like that. Okay. Budget, something that is definitely super important, especially on small and indie films. This is going to be the biggest variable for like what you are able to accomplish. And you can do a lot with a small budget, like more than you would think. There's ways to kind of change location or building or a set that aren't going to cost you very much. Like something I learned from Maggie was putting contact paper on things. You can immediately change the way a space looks just by changing like one aspect from a really ugly steel to wood, like what she did, or like a copper is something I did on a set once, just to like completely shift the way the room feels. Because if you're going for like a warm aspect and the room is super cool, there's only so many ways you can change that. And lighting is a good one, but if it contrasts with what's in the set, that's not going to work as well. So having that conversation with a producer is going to be a big part of your prep. They're going to kind of be able to talk with you about what's possible. And then from that, you should be able to take your knowledge of the script and the script breakdown that you created with all the props and things that you already know you need. And then you can kind of take your general understanding of how much things cost, add that up on what you think it might be. For weird stuff, I usually end up trying to find examples. Like if you're going to have some sort of weaponry or some sort of rental, that's going to be a big thing to kind of figure out and will probably cost more than you think it will. So being able to kind of figure that out before talking with your producer is really helpful, because you can say, hey, I know it sounds like I'm asking for a lot of money, but this is why. This is like what that's going towards. This is why this isn't possible, or like why this budget will or will not work. So Maggie, what do you have experience in?
I think that's a really good skill to learn, is to be able to, because especially like the more you get into it, a lot of things just seem like obvious to me or the art director or whoever, because you're like, oh, well, they say they want a casket for this scene in this church, and it's going to be a whole thing, and that's going to be very expensive, and I don't know if we'll have the money for that. But like being able to explain that to producers is like a whole nother thing, because a lot of times they get the script, they hire someone, and they're not thinking about these things, and just being able to come back to them and say, here's my breakdown, here's my budget, this is what I'm working with. I don't know if we'll be able to accomplish that with this. And just like, being able to not be like mean or a jerk about it, but just be like, if you want this to happen, we need more money. And if we don't have more money, we have to find something else. And like, something I've gotten pretty good at is like being able to come up with solutions. You don't want to be the person who's always like, I have a problem and I can't figure it out. So it's just good to be able to, one, explain, if something can't work, to bring that up ahead of time instead of waiting until like the day before you shoot. And also to be able to offer a solution, like instead of a casket, could it be an urn that you can buy off Amazon for $20? Like, just to be able to have options.
Going into a conversation with alternatives is going to help that conversation steer in your direction. That's always super helpful to have. And then along with that, you'll also want to think about what you're starting with. Like, what is your blank slate? Where are you shooting? Are you on a set that doesn't have any furniture? Is that going to be a huge expense for you? Or are you in a house that already has all of the set decoration you need, and you can kind of use that money in other ways? So thinking about your locations and your starting point is another big point to touch on. And then there's expendables, a small little thing that you might not think about at the beginning, but things like tape or command hooks. With COVID, Lysol wipes were a huge thing for me at the last feature I did. Like, I wanted to wipe everything down every night when I was in my car and just make sure that everything was staying as clean as possible, especially if it's stuff that you're bringing back into your own home after you're done using it in a shoot. So kind of think about what sort of things you might need that get used throughout the shoot but aren't seen on camera.
Yeah, that's something I always, when I'm creating a budget, it's always like the props, the set deck, whatever specifics. And then I like to have a little cushion in there, specifically for expendables, because it's like, oh, well, I have like my command hook kit. I just have like a little box, and it's got every type of command hook you could ever need. And just because I have those, I'm going to use them. So I'm going to need to buy more, even if like they don't get used on the shoot. They're still my personal things that I need to have to do my job. So it's just like an expense that, you're always going to need to have. Same thing with like gaff tape. I have like, miscellaneous contact paper and vinyl rolls and stuff like that. It's the same thing as, if you're working in G&E and you're buying a pack of clothespins and gaff tape and whatever else G&E buys. It's like the small things that you don't really think about, but they do add up. And they're super important to help do your job.
Absolutely. Something you mentioned was a cushion, and that's huge. Always leave space, because you will end up spending money like during shooting that you did not think you were going to spend.
Yeah.
Cushion is huge.
It's going to be some sort of like emergency thing. The day before the shoot, the director's going to be like, you know what? It would be really cool if you had a bike in this scene. You're going to be like, where can I rent a bike? Right. So it's always good to include that. And then, best case scenario, you can come back and be like, look, I was under budget. I saved you money, whatever. And,
Oh yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah.
Another one that I just was not prepared for, that ended up like is way more money than I would ever think, is food. Mm-hmm. Whenever there is food in a set, you need so many multiples of it. If somebody's going to be cooking, you have to start all over every single take. So yeah, food is a huge expense that genuinely does not seem like it should be.
Yeah.
That truly adds up really quickly. So if you have a short with a bunch of food in it, keep that in mind when you're thinking about budget.
Yeah. Another good thing, just talking about food, it's always good to reach out to the producer or the actor directly if you have their contact information. But just to see, if they have any dietary restrictions, because, you don't want to be giving gluten-filled pancakes to an actor who cannot eat gluten. And then they're like, actually, I can't. And you're like, can you just like pretend? Like, that's always a weird situation. So it just makes everyone feel better. Like the actor's more comfortable. You feel better about yourself if you're like, hey, just wanted to check before I go to the store, any dietary restrictions, any allergies, anything like that. Just something you may not always think of, but a good thing to get out ahead of.
Definitely. We had an actress who was vegan on a set where I was giving them pasta, and did not cross my mind, but like the pasta sauce had cream in it. So that wasn't something that she could eat.
Yeah.
And yeah, interacting with actors is something that actually I should have included on that first slide. If you are in a situation where you're able to communicate with them and it's comfortable and not strange for you to reach out, that is a huge help, especially if you are doing something really, really small and they might be able to kind of help you bring in the props that you need.
Yeah.
Just from things that they own. That's immensely helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and also just interact
with them.
Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, that was it. You're good.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just nice to like establish some sort of relationship, even if it's like a couple days before the shoot, just so like, a lot of times the actors, they maybe know the director, they don't know anyone on the crew. They're there, they're working the same as you. And, I personally get nervous meeting new people. And it's just nice to have like that connection and be like, oh, thanks so much for emailing me, or thanks for bringing like this sweatshirt. This is really going to be great. And, because a lot of times if you are the only our person on set, you are interacting with them a lot. You're like, here's your backpack. You're handing them props. You're like, your hair looks good, whatever. And just helps to kind of have that, like, it's like another layer of comfort, instead of like meeting someone brand new day of, just makes me feel better. The actor feels better, and everyone's friends at the end of the day.
Definitely. It is really nice when you get along with the actors, because
yeah.
I mean, if you're doing makeup too, you're going to be all up in their face all the time. So yeah, those are all great. Okay. This kind of goes in line with that. the crew. So this is a fun little slide because here are 3 examples of a typical small film art crew. And then at the very top right was the crew for a full indie feature St. Francis. So again, that is going to be super dependent on how much money you have, what type of shoot it is, where you are, how long it is, because sometimes you might have an art hand or someone on that can only stay for part of it. So you might be bringing in other people that you need to talk to and kind of re-explain things to, or communicate things twice because you have different people coming in for different parts of the shoot. So yeah, this one varies greatly. We've touched on this a little bit, but a lot of times it is going to end up just being one person. 2 people is really nice, but that is kind of where it sits for the most part, especially in shorts and like really low budget indies. That being said, if you do have the opportunity to work with another person, that title can vary. I've done sets where an art director is the secondary person, and then I've also done sets where they just do props. So having that conversation with that person and being able to bring on someone that you really trust and know how to work with is really helpful. Because if you know how to communicate with that person and they share your vision and you can kind of push forward without having to communicate as much on set, that will only benefit you. Just because you can only have so much communication. Like, definitely communicate as much as possible and like ask each other questions and keep up with it. But when you're on set dressing and they're somewhere else doing something, you're gonna have to make decisions with or without each other. Maggie, you've probably worked a little bit more with crews and like larger crews, smaller crews. For me, it's mostly just been 1 or 2.
Yeah. I mean, really one of the best things I learned at DePaul was just having the opportunity to work on sets where I could bring on other people and, getting that experience of like running a crew and being in charge of like multiple set builds and finding, who fits in what position best. If someone's really leaning into like the construction side, letting them kind of take point on that and have that be their thing. And then like, just seeing how everyone works together and where their skills will serve the film best and how everyone works together. That's just like a really important skill to have. And it's a difficult thing to get because, like you said, Cayman, a lot of low budget things, a lot of shorts are super, super small. Especially now, in COVID times, it's especially the case. So yeah, if you do get the opportunity to hire people to work with you, it's a great way for you to learn how to be like a leader and a production designer in charge of people. And it's also just a great way to bring other people into our department. And yeah, for people to come in and kind of feel it out and be like, oh, I do like props. I'm not super into set decorating. I don't really like, deciding what furniture goes there or whatever. And yeah, kind of see like where your place is, what you're leaning towards. It's good to sort of get a feel for everything before you're like, I'm never doing props. I hate doing props. I don't want to hand things to actors. Like, give everything a chance. And that being said, when I'm hiring people, it's great to be able to hire people that you trust, that you work well with. And for me, especially on features, it's great to have someone to be like, am I forgetting anything on this scene? Like, things happen so fast and the days are so long where you're like, okay, we brought this in here and then this character gets that prop. And just to have like another mind to be my second brain really is just, I can't say enough good things about it. So it's great getting to work with other creative people. It also, like you said, a lot of times you only get the budget for like one other person, maybe 2 people. And it's kind of up to you to decide if you need someone to be your art director and be your second brain in my case, or if it's like a super props heavy thing and you've got a lot of like food scenes and like drug scenes or whatever, and you want someone to just focus on that, and they're just doing props and you're doing everything else. It definitely varies, project to project, and it's really your preference. So yeah, I guess that's what I want to say about that.
Yeah. And that being said, work on as much as you can. Be that other person as much as you can. Don't just do things as a production designer because you think that's what you like the most.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I tripped up at first. I was like just focusing on that. And it took me a really long time to realize that I love set decorating. Like that's where my passion lies. So it might be something different than you think. Do as many different types of things as you can.
Yeah.
Do as much as possible, especially when you're in school. It is so helpful to be able to experiment and kind of find out what you like and find out how you like delegating and meet people that you can delegate to.
Yeah. And it's also just, you can absolutely learn something from every position. If you are hardcore, you're really set on being a props master, you love props, like looking at this list, even if you are, just a set dresser or a carpenter or something, like whatever position you're in, whatever job you're doing, it'll just help you understand how the whole department works together, how a graphic designer works with the props or how a carpenter works with the art director or whatever. And yeah, don't don't write off a position before you try it. Go into everything with an open mind.
For sure. Okay, this is the last slide I have pulled up, and some of this we've already kind of touched on, but like genuinely just miscellaneous things that either I wouldn't have thought of or other people that other PDs that I've talked to hadn't thought of at their first shoot. I think the biggest one that popped up was set dress. Like, especially when you start out, it's not a thought process that pops into your head, at least not for me and a couple of the other girls that I've worked with. Mm-hmm. But it is so immensely important. Like things that are not mentioned in the script are going to make or break a film. Like what is going on in the background and how much space you're covering is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And that's another great way to kind of take a small budget and make it feel like more, by thrifting or bringing in things that you already own. Like I have a stash of lamps that I've just kind of kept from over the years in my basement, and they're incredibly helpful because they're not the cheapest thing, and being able to have a lot of different options is really, really nice. Mm-hmm. Maggie, was that just something that you were kind of surprised by in your early shoots?
Oh yeah. I mean, actually this picture down here of all the diner, all the booths, that was the first feature I did. And
wow.
And I had I don't think I'd ever designed something before. I was learning as I went, and that it was a super stressful experience, but also great because I was there and I was looking at the monitor and I was like, oh, this could look better if I move these plants over here. And you know what, the board in the back looks too empty. And what can I do right now that would, make this look more real and make it feel like, a late night diner or whatever. And so just learning as I went and being able to see results as I went was super, super helpful. And that goes along with transforming a space.
Definitely. There are so many things you can do to a space to completely shift the way it feels or the way it looks. Covering the bulletin board is so funny. That's, again, not something you would really think of, but it makes a huge difference in the background because it makes it feel real. Mm-hmm. For this bottom left picture, we kind of last minute had to create a radio station in a basement. So obviously a basement doesn't look like a radio station or a podcast studio, which is what it kind of ended up transforming into. Mm-hmm. But literally covering the walls was an easy way to transform that space. Like I talked about earlier, taking contact paper and transforming surfaces is another big one. Yeah. Transforming your space is big. You can make things feel totally different than when you started just by adding a simple thing or covering something.
It's also on a lot of low budget things, like my first feature, there's no money. It's just like, we've got $50 and that's enough to buy like the 2 props we need. And then you're like, okay, great. So being able to work with, what you have on location, and like walking into a space and being like, I can rearrange this furniture so it'll work better for the film and it'll look nicer. And yeah, I've done that on a couple locations, and the owners have been like, huh, you know what? It looks nicer in here. I think I might keep it. And you're like, thank you.
I love when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, but just, being able to work with what you have and making what you have work for you.
Yeah, moving things will do so much more than you think it will, especially when you're like looking at a monitor, because something is going to feel normal and good and solid before you look at that monitor, and then once you see it like in the space, it's going to feel totally wrong.
Yeah.
More often than not. Things will probably end up having to be moved around super unnaturally in like the actual space, but on the camera they look great. So don't be afraid for things to like feel totally unnatural when you're kind of sitting in them, as long as it still works. It's going to look good on camera, and you have to kind of make sure that you're checking that and using that monitor as much as possible if that's something that you have. With that. Temporary changes, we kind of talked about with the expendables, making sure that you're not damaging any property, making sure that everything can be returned exactly the way it was.
Yeah, taking pictures of locations is the number one most important thing.
Take pictures.
Every time I walk into a space, I'm just like, first, before I do anything, before I move anything, and then you put everything back exactly how you found it, and you look like a hero. So
when it looks cleaner than it was before, that's when you've done a really good job.
Yeah.
Leah, you popped in. Did you have something?
I did. No, I just want to, it feels like you guys are wrapping up, so I just wanted to come in and just say, like, thank you so much for doing this. I learned a lot. I feel like, especially in student films, like art, like you said, can make or break your film. Like, art and production design really determines, in my opinion, the production value, which is like your big selling point. That's like why, short films are calling cards and why features get sold. But it's the thing that I feel most often gets overlooked in student films. Kind of my final question that I have for you guys that I've been asking like all of our How to Prep host is, what advice or information would you want a producer / director / writer to kind of have? Like, this series is for first year writer directors who are trying to get something off the ground. And so what would you as a production designer want them to know before they do their first project?
That's a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, I like Nahal, we were talking about cinematography, and I was like, what do you think directors most often forget about? Or like, what's something that you wish they thought about more?
I think this might sound harsh, but like being realistic is a big one.
That's what I was going to say.
And just like understanding that some things might need to change in order for them to be doable. Especially in more like creative deals or things that have like really big, like if you are writing something and you have like something super specific in mind that is proper production design related, just understanding that might shift as time goes forward, and it might be easier or better to do it in a different way than what you're envisioning. So just kind of being open to those changes and knowing that we are doing everything that we can to help your vision come to life.
Yeah.
And that's like, we want to create something that you're proud of.
Yeah. I was going to say something very similar. Was just, as much as it would be so cool to make like a really big, huge set build for a huge sci-fi movie and to make it really cool or whatever and create this world. Just to be realistic about that, you know. There's a lot of limiting factors, especially for student shoots. Money is a big one.
Yeah.
And timing is another one. You know, it's like if you're trying to do a build at CineSpace and you can only get in there a day before, or you know, the Friday, and you're trying to shoot Saturday, you can't build and dress and have a full. I mean, maybe you can, but you know, that's a lot to ask for someone. And just to be realistic, if you can't get into a location until the day of and you want to add, you know, if you've got like this person has a butterfly collection and there's butterflies all over the walls in this huge like 2-bedroom apartment or something, like that's cool. That could look cool, but understand that like it takes time to do all this. And, you know, as much as the production designer wants to work with you, just to be realistic about what can be accomplished and what can be accomplished that will look good and will be something everyone can be proud of. Because, you know, I never want to make a movie that doesn't look good, you know. No production designer is ever out to sabotage someone. So yeah, just being able to like work with everyone and work with your limiting factors to create something that, you know, will be something everyone on the crew can be happy with in the end. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, any closing thoughts?
Um,
You don't have to have any. I just want to check.
I don't think so. I think the only thing we didn't touch on was like logos, branding, and then like permits and stuff, which is like truly a whole nother category.
Yeah, we had Tim Pertnell come on and talk about like licensing and branding.
Oh,
and
amazing!
Stuff. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then I'm good.
Yeah. Awesome.
Our department is really fun, and everyone should try it.
Yeah.
Even if you aren't an art department person, like try it out if you get the chance. Do different departments. Like that was always a super great learning tool.
Yeah. Just do as much as you can. You know, if you want to be an art department, take a camera class. It'll help you be a better production designer. If you're a producer, take, you know, intro to production design or whatever the class is. You know, the more you learn and the more you interact with other departments, it's just going to make you better at whatever job you want to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, the two of you, for taking time out of your day, and like Maggie especially. You know, you didn't even I know you didn't even go to DePaul. We're not even connected, so thank you so much for being here and doing this and like sharing your knowledge. I know production design, it feels like this just very mystical thing that, like, you know, PD's just showing up on set and make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for demystifying a little bit.
Of course. Happy to help.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's it for me. Thank you so much for being here.